Hi everybody, welcome to the Jason Gregory podcast. This is Guy Young.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Jason. Today we're going to speak about how our nature was warped from birth. This is kind of an idea in Eastern spirituality especially, and you and I talk about this a lot. So the idea that we were pure from birth, all of us. So this is all of our personal story really, right? So you and I've had Australian cultural indoctrination, you've had Korean cultural indoctrination, and not just on that level. We've had parental indoctrination, we've had educational indoctrination, you name it. So we've all been shaped by an external system,
Yeah.
so to speak. And the idea in Hinduism, Taoism, and Buddhism is that from birth we were originally pure, right? So look at a baby when they're born and up until they're around, just before they go to school, right? Their eyes are glowing and they see the world very, in a sense, like almost like non-dualistic. Like it's a real joy to be alive.
Yeah.
Like what Alan Watts said that time when you hear a baby going blah, 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 and making all of these funny noises. It's just like, it's weird to be alive and it's fun,
Yeah.
But then, we start to get educated. We start to know who we are, or supposedly know who we are. You're Guy Young, I'm Jason. You should act a certain way, behave a certain way. And we all go through that, right?
Yeah, it's just like newborn baby when the baby is born, just like a blank canvas.
Blank canvas, yeah.
The babies don't have any preconceived idea of how world is and how world's supposed to be, and they just come into this family, so-called family, a mother and father, or any form of family, and that's the kind of first people they get to meet, and they grow up in a household. Whatever the parents' beliefs are comes to the baby's belief. They get to learn and get trained to think that way, and they build this idea of how the world is. They build this framework in their own mind from a household. And yeah, like you said, then we go to school and then we learn what textbook says, how things are, and yeah, there we go.
Well, it's not a knock on education, right? Because education, well, it is a knock on education, but it isn't also. Because, obviously it is helpful to know language, to know mathematics, to know science and all this. This is useful. But it's the overemphasis on education. For example, like you're from Korea, there's a highly educated society. You go to school from like 7 in the morning to 11 at night when you're in high school and middle school. The indoctrination is so thick. And it's all based on the idea of who you should be in the society. Just your status, your certain position, right? And that goes for any society as well, culture, any culture. But you see it a lot in China, Korea, Japan, because of the Confucian indoctrination. And that's all based on the idea that you're not completely fine how you are. This idea of Ramana, of be as you are, as your pure existence, we've gone way further. We've gone way in the opposite direction, So we're basing our whole worldview on that, exactly what Confucius believed, that we are beasts and we need to shape ourselves. So there's this idea in Taoism of, there's this idea in Taoism versus Confucianism of the unhewn wood or the uncarved block in Taoism, and the carving and polishing metaphor for Confucius, so the carved block. And this is obviously a battle between residing in your pure nature versus self-cultivation. Now Lao Tzu explains in the later teachings, the Hua Hu Ching, how back before like the Warring States period of China, they didn't need self-cultivation methods because they were in harmony with the Tao, the way, they're in harmony with nature basically, and they were just living out their natures. And then what happened was societies and agrarian cultures began to develop, and this began to warp our pure nature, because then we had to fit into a certain social system for that social system to be prosperous and for it to grow and evolve. And, we are all a product of that, right? So the society that you and I live in right now is a product of that. It's that original idea of we need a society to shape the characters of people, in a sense to warp their individual nature so they can fit into a greater social system or culture.
Yeah, the social system is so worshipped by these Confucian idea and Confucian scholars back in the day. I'm not so sure why they valued so much in society and kingly regime politically. So they believed that human beings are not pure. We weren't born pure. So I don't know, like how far do we have to go back to remember, like how our parents compare you to other kids, and like it's just very subtle. And it's not to completely blame our parents. No. They also were raised in that way, and that comes down to children, next generation, and it's very subtle when they talk about like how other kids are doing, how they are our friends when we were like age 3 or 4. We don't know how. We just don't remember it consciously, but it's in deep down our subconscious level, and which, unless we deal with it consciously now, it'll always repeat it within ourselves, and it'll come out in certain behavior and certain way of thinking. And so that's sort of like a social training started at a very young age, since very young age. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's tragic or it giving us chance to undo all these things in a later age. I'm not so sure, but it's definitely something very strange.
But it's the game we all play, right?
Yeah.
It's all of us play it. Like we're born pure, then our nature is shaped, warped, to be precise, and then we somehow have to become natural again. That's like the paradox in Zen. Like there's a famous quote about that. Like it's really strange to try and be natural again, because we already are natural, but our natures were warped. But it goes to your point, what you were saying about being beasts. Like all of it is based on the idea that we're not pure. We're not like in Christianity, right? We're all sinners, and there's nothing we can do about it. We're sinners. That's it, Just accept it.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to live in this guilt forever. I don't know.
Well, it seems that way, you know what I mean? Like it seems that you just have to accept that you're a sinner, and you do your best, and if you follow the teachings of the Bible, you'll go to heaven. And, it's a very strange philosophy, but it's all based on that you're not pure. It's exactly like Confucius. That their starting place is the same, right? The starting place is that you're not pure. So you're a beast. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to create some sort of religion or some sort of society. With Confucius, it's a socio-economic religious system, right? So it's pretty comprehensive. And you have to apply yourself to that, and that's how you become, natural. So you're supposed to follow a system to naturalize yourself, and this is completely opposite to the great Eastern teachings like Taoism and that, who say that no, what you need to do is you've got to return to the uncarved block, because you were already pure. And then what happened was your nature was warped, and then a lot of people, you always hear the counter argument from, especially Western people. They say, "Oh, what about?" See, they're so short-sighted when they think about this. What about criminals and rapists and so forth and so on? Yes, they're the product of their nature being warped. This is why there have been psychologists over time who have been in a lot of battles with just the governments of certain countries, when they try to explain to them that the reason why these people are criminals is because of the society and the environment that they were brought up in, their actual indoctrination. We don't all deal with it the same. You know, you and I might be able to deal with it better than, you know, a serial killer. They, you know what I mean? Like, because they couldn't deal with the weight of expectation, the weight of, you know, all of these things in their lives. And that's not to excuse their actions. So we're not getting into that. Everyone has to take ownership of their actions in life. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about just the initial result of our nature being warped. And so, you know, a lot of those arguments that especially Westerners put up, especially to psychologists and that, it often frustrates psychologists because they're saying, no. We need to understand and study these criminals, why they became this way, why their mind is this way, right? Like, why did he decide one day just to start shooting a school full of kids? Like, what motivated that individual? Like, what's the deeper thing here? Like, we can't really resolve that if we just put them in the electric chair and finish their life, you know. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean we excuse their actions. But we need to study the mind, because to try and prevent any of these sorts of things from happening in the future, we need to understand the situation. You don't just get an eraser and erase it. You can still see the text on the paper, right? You're erasing the pencil out, but you're like, no, I can still read that though. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. We need to really understand like the situation. And
yeah, understanding our mind, especially modern days, people's mind, is such a huge project. I think it's a huge deal because world has become so complicated and complex. Like, and each individual on Earth has the uniqueness in their nature and also how they've been brought up. And how they've been brought up, it also very depend on how their parents are like, how their very immediate environment when they were growing up and since they were newborn baby and you know.
Yeah.
So we need to take a lot into account, I think. Yes. So it's a very complicated problem, but I don't think that just as a Confucianism says that we were born impure and therefore we need to carve ourselves to fit into society. And as that has to have strong belief that the way the society is right or correct or something like this.
Yes.
And we're supposed to play our role to fit into society because that's what we're supposed to do. And I'm not sure if that fits to every individual. Obviously not.
No.
Yeah.
Well, look at Confucianism, right? Like, if you just unpack Confucianism, you see that, well, okay, like, we are natural, right? Human beings are natural. That's an artificial thing created by man, right? It's an artificial system. So what you are doing is you're taking a person and you're saying, apply this to yourself because you will become a junzi, a superior person, or, you know, to be precise, a gentleman. This is not a system for women. And you know what I mean? And so apply this to yourself and you will be a superior man. But it's based on someone's idea.
Yes.
So first of all, how can we trust this guy? I mean, this is obviously Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi's argument back in the day. Like, well and good for you guys to be doing this, but you're throwing all your eggs in one basket. You're thinking that this guy's got the actual path to the way, to the Tao. So you've turned the Tao into something artificial, something that we induce as opposed to just allow it to be within ourselves. And so this is how you can actually destroy that idea, because it's just a system that you apply to yourself. And then, which system is the best? Because you have the Confucian system, you have the Christian system, the Muslim system, the Hindu system, Buddhist system. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
there's no an absolute right system.
No, there's no absolute right system. So you have all of these systems. And some of their original positions are better than the others, right? So like Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, your original nature is pure. You're connected to Brahman or Tao or what have you, and then the process of the 10,000 things begin to happen, right? So the energies of yin and yang begin to interact, and we have this manifest reality, and we are part of that duality. But the process and the work for all of us is to hit the reverse button and to come back into our original non-dual nature, which is what we experienced up until we went to, well, we had glimpses, or we were in that experience until we went to school, and we began to, as we became more conscious, we began to learn who we supposedly are. And even if you look at Confucianism itself, I mean, there's many ridiculous things about the system. You should sit a certain way. There's a way that you're supposed to sleep. There's all of these things that are very, like, unnatural, that really, debunks the actual system, because it doesn't relate to the naturalness of a human being. And so the role for all of us as people is to come back to our original nature, and that is not defined by a system and education, your parents or what have you. Our parents, as you said, are often the product of the system, the same system, right? You're from Korea, your parents are the product of that same system. Then there are those few oddballs like you and I and everyone watching this, listening to this, that wake up to the fact that, hold the phone, this is not actually who I truly am. I want to actually know who I am. Like, I want to know who the subject is. We build our whole life on building a status, accumulating wealth. It's always based on a system to appear in how we appear to other people, So we're trying to build our self-image so we look good in that system to other people. It's pretty stupid, right? Because you're not focusing on, but who am I to begin with?
Yeah.
But what do the cultural systems say? Oh, who you are is who you've become. And it's like, no, it's not who I've become. I was someone before I became this. And am I even this? Like, you say I became this, but am I really this? So am I a politician? Am I an author? Am I really any of this?
I think the biggest flaw in the social system of today, and also Confucian idea, is that they didn't think of suppression would happen in every single individual.
Yeah.
From trying to uphold this something we call society, it comes in price. I don't know if Confucius didn't know about it. That was kind of blind spot of his own, thing, or he knew about it, but he just didn't think it's important, or it's not important enough to address it. When every single individual are trying to build this something called society or community or whatever, we need to participate. Every single individual participate, but that participation can come from in many different angles. But it also, once the society becomes bigger and bigger, what comes to place is the individual suppression. In the name of society, we need to suppress a lot of things. Like, for example, like you mentioned about being a junza, gentleman, so-called gentleman, the idea that Confucius kept emphasized. Like, wear certain clothes, and even how to speak, how to behave, and everything. How to sleep, just everything. Like, see how much you have to think about it, like even when you just sit, we can't just relax and sit, or just put the legs on the table or something. You can't do that. And actually, I was brought up like that. You're not supposed to do certain things. You're not supposed to put legs up in a dining table, for example. Like, it's a bit too, comes to every single thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It becomes so much of a burden in daily life. You want to relax, you know. So that sort of thing, that it has to suppress a lot of things in our just daily lives, or even when we think, we have to worry about every single thing. And especially far as an Asian country, the still people suffer from it, I think.
For sure.
And they feel such like guilty if they act a certain way which is different. And when people see the people who are very different and act very like rebel or being revolutionary, in deep their mind, they support it. And
For sure.
nowadays, actually, they're expressing it, which is really good. It's slowly changing. But what needs to go one step further is that these individuals have to take their own steps as well for their own life, which needs a lot of courage and life experience. But I think you can, if you just, it's a decision, it's your choice, your own life for yourself, not for anybody else. You need to make your decision, and you have to trust that decision is right for yourself, and just truly be free from it. But because it's been, that conditioning had been for thousands of years, and the tradition and then the cultural thing is still going on, people still feel very like, guilty. And it's not to blame them, it's just how we all brought up. Again, we were trained that way. We were trained to feel that way in order to, you know, uphold what parents want of you, and what society wants from you. You know, it's.
Well, the overthinking is what kills people, because you're trying. Yeah, you know, it's not natural. You have to think about everything. Like you said, I have to sit a certain way. You always have to appease your parents. This is causing so much psychological problem in someone, in an individual, because it's not natural to overthink about anything, really. Like, it separates you from not only the divine, like not only Brahman and the Tao, but it separates you from other people as well. Like, you have no connection with other people because you're constantly thinking about everything, and you're in this kind of mode of self-preservation always, because if you're not applying yourself to the principles of that culture or society, then, you know, you might fall out of favor with your parents or your society, and you may be frowned upon. But as you said, like, that's the birth of the rebel and the revolutionary, and people actually admire that. But, and again, see, it comes down to a place of the individual versus the collective, because that rebel has taken a stance and said, you know what, I don't think that this is actually healthy for us. I know that we are brought up in a Confucian culture, but I don't think that this is the right way for us to go, because I'm seeing people jump out of buildings, teenagers like in Korea who are committing suicide. You never, I mean, number one, yeah. So
in the world.
When you and I were kids, right? You didn't even have it. I didn't even know what suicide was up until I was almost like 15 and stuff. Like, maybe I was just ignorant, but because there wasn't much of it around back in that. I mean, not as much as there is today. And there definitely wasn't teenagers, and in worst case, there's even some people who are very young who are taking their own life. And so this comes down to that an individual, say for example, some of these people who do commit suicide, it's hard for them to live up to the expectations of their parents, of the educational system they're brought up in, and of the society they're in. And it becomes overwhelming. Again, like I mentioned before, not everyone has an aptitude for what a society and a culture and parents want from you. We're disconnected from listening to people, you know what I mean? Listening to the individual, like who they are, what makes them tick. You know, this is why certain societies like Auroville were created, right? Auroville was created in South India because they wanted to finally listen to the individual and see what they have an aptitude for, what they resonate with, to produce psychologically sane people. that was Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's intention, right? But a lot of the, well, not all, but a lot of the systems we have and a lot of societies that we've built are based on competition, are based on how you should be in the world, and it's all based on not the individual itself. Even though you even may still see individualistic people, but they're still playing a game based on the rules of that society. The true individual doesn't base their games on the rules of a society. They stand firmly on their own 2 feet, and they're on the path of individual liberation. They don't need an overarching system to tell them or to define who they are, you know. And that's a lot of the problems within Confucian societies, also Christian societies, and many of those sort of very strict external systems, where we always have to remember, and this is the thing that Confucius didn't explain because this ruins his whole hypothesis, is that the individual is the community. It's not the other way around, you know. Individuals make up a community, and they make up a system or a society or a culture. We, in some sense, we agree upon certain things for the better of mankind, but when they begin to dictate and try to define who you are, then maybe the system is not as healthy as we think, you know.
Yeah, well, we spoke about this before, that society or community or even nation, these things are concepts.
Yep.
They actually don't exist.
No.
We can't grab and feel it. There is no shape to it. It's a very abstract idea, which the leaders have created.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just working the other way around right now. That we as individuals supposed to follow rules of society to keep it going, while we kind of become ignorant to what's really happening within us, and that cause that in the end causing a lot of problems in society.
Yeah.
It just bounce back to kind of a breaking up the society, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, if every single individual were to be happy and healthy, then we'll create happy and healthy society, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, well, yeah, there will be, consequences to the society.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people kind of don't think about it, because we always our like a value and importance in life always had been projecting outward, never included ourselves. But that's where the biggest mistakes come to place.
Yes.
We need to think kind of the other way around. So that there are lots of problems in society, right? That's because we have problems in ourselves. So where should we start? Where should we begin with?
Exactly, yeah. But that's not what they want you to believe. They just want you to believe. They want you to believe that you're a beast, and that you have these problems, and you need to cultivate yourself to the social needs of the society. Don't worry about understanding who you are. Like, that's going too far for them. You know what I mean? So this brings about the heart of the whole psychopathy of it. You mentioned before suppression, and so it's a suppression of who you truly are. You know what I mean? It's a suppression of your original nature, because you're trying to be this person according to the overarching system. And what happens then is you begin to try to think with that, and you judge the world according to that system. And so what's that? What is that doing within you? It's suppressing who you truly are, because the things that you want to do, you constantly, they're there, because we all feel like, what we resonate with, what we feel inclined towards. But then we're told to suppress that, because that's not what the system is allowing you to do. Because we have a battle of the collective society versus the individual. This is what's going on, right? Instead of the individual informing the society, we've got the society for informing the individual. And this is what happened for who knows how long when people had to suppress that they were gay, right? They had to suppress that they were gay because the overarching system wouldn't allow them to be gay. And thankfully, in recent times, there's more of an acceptance towards that, so people don't have to become psychologically damaged and suppress their nature just because the society doesn't agree, says that, oh no, that's frowned upon here. And we do still have a lot of societies and cultures and religions like that around the world who still do that. But when you look at if you look at Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, they don't really have problems with that because there's no sexual mandate of, you should do this and you should do that. It's more, obviously, they're more based on higher consciousness. So those things, we focus way too much on sexual orientation in this world, you know what I mean? There's way more problems in the world than if someone's gay or they're not. So, we need to grow up a little bit. That yes, there's always been gay people, there always will be gay people, and there will always be heterosexual people too. That's the way it is. So we've got a lot more things that we need to worry about than that. And we would know that if we weren't always constantly suppressing our nature. And so we have to unravel ourselves from this, because otherwise we're going to continue to be insane people. It's like what Hans-Georg Maueller mentioned about East Asia, China, Korea, Japan specifically, saying there is a fundamental psychopathy there, because that's what Confucianism breeds. Confucianism breeds an artificial system that tries to naturalize something that's completely unnatural. You know what I mean? So the whole system is completely unnatural, but it's trying to naturalize that within you. And what's that going to do? That can only lead to a really bad result, right?
It was never to work.
No, it could never work. And it has never worked, actually.
Yeah, true.
As you know, it has never worked. It's just bred a lot of people who, accept... Because people most of us are pretty innocent, and we just accept whatever's given before us. And, that's all well and good. But places like, especially Far East Asia, have had systems like Taoism that have been for thousands of years pointing to the fact that it's you're natural. But, that was not taken on board a lot, because a lot of people, maybe because of the influence of Confucius during the Warring States period of China and the immensity of how he, promoted his philosophy, it just took root more than Taoism and other systems, But when you start to explain to someone that, look, there's nothing wrong with you per se, you know what I mean? You've just bought hook, line, and sinker into an external system that's shaped your character. You're not a bad person. You're not. I know you behave a certain way, but you behave this way because of your indoctrination. But who's speaking to people on this level? That's the problem, right? Because usually we just see someone who is acting crazy and you go, don't worry, hard case, they're crazy, crazy, you know what I mean? But you're not thinking about it deeply enough. Why are they crazy? Well, he or she was brought up in a Confucian family, taught to act a certain way and this and that, but all they want to do is play the guitar. But he's not allowed to play the guitar, and he's become a violent drunk. And you have to taper back, where the seeds of this psychotic behavior began, this bad behavior began. And it began because the heart of the psychopathy is, in a sense, to say that you are not natural and you don't belong.
Another thing I wanted to just mention is that the Confucianism worked for that time, I think. The warring states of China, as we know, there's a lot of confusion and constant battle with neighbor countries, and they need a solid system to bring everybody together to build a strong community and society in order to strengthen the nation back in the day. But that's what we were talking about, how long ago? 2,000 years ago? 3,000 years ago?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it did a great job, I reckon.
Of course, yeah.
And it worked, I guess, when Confucius was alive. And it went on, I mean, it still goes on, but it went on for a very long time. And it did its job for that time. But now we are living in a completely different world. Society is not going anywhere.
No.
It already firmly has established for thousands of years, and developing science and technology had brought everyone together more than ever. And there is no need to suppress individual characteristics anymore, I don't think.
No.
Because society is already been built good. And Joseph Heinrich says that it's cultural evolution. It's very successful. Humanity, in his view, that it's very successful as a species. How we create a society to learn live with one another, help each other, etc. So it's about time to move on from the strong indoctrination of Confucian teachings.
And any teaching that teaches you that you're a beast, because it doesn't align with who we truly are. It's not just Confucianism, but we can use Confucianism as an example. That, like you said, 2,500 years ago, yeah, okay, it worked. Because maybe there was discord in society. We don't know. None of us existed at that time. So maybe there was discord in society, and Confucius thought, you know what, we need some sort of system of behavior here that will help us at least get along so we can become prosperous. And yeah, that may have lended its hand to cultural evolution, even though Taoists were always there as well. We need to acknowledge that as well. But as you said, like with anything, time moves on, and it's adapt or die. You know what I mean? If the society or the system doesn't evolve, then in most cases that will just drop away. As we know, there's been millions of religions, right? And we don't even know half of them, but they've all dropped away because they couldn't adapt with the current situation of that time. And this is why those three great Eastern traditions are great, because they've endured time because of they're based simply on the understanding of consciousness and the idea that at the basis of our mind we are pure. And so that's something that will never go away. It's not because it's not giving you a system of you should behave a certain way and make sure you sleep a certain way, and its premise is not, to start with, is not that you are a beast and this and that, which is again the wrong starting place. We don't have enough people out there who will explain to you you're perfectly fine, you're pure, you're fundamentally good, as Mencius would say. Mencius was big on this, as you know. Mencius was huge on the idea of Lao Tzu. Mencius was considered a Confucian, but in all possibilities, he was a Taoist, because when you read the Mengzi, when you read the Mencius text, it's a pure Taoist text. You know what I mean? Of course, he talks about cultivating the sprouts and stuff like that, but it's on a very simplistic level, and he's understanding that we are fundamentally good. So the cultivation of the sprout, so to speak, within us, cultivating, good habits and stuff like this, and cultivating compassion for others and empathy, is getting back to your true nature. So he's saying we're fundamentally good, and he proves this with analogies like the boy in the well. Like, so for example, if the boy was near the well, and say if we all were in the vicinity of the boy, and the boy was getting water and he starts to fall in, what's your initial response? We all feel like, you throw your own self-preservation out of the window in that moment. You don't just sit back and go, we'll see what happens, yeah? We'll see how he goes. None of us are like that. Even probably the most damaged psychological individual still has a feeling that they have to save that child before falling into the well. It's an initial response that's beyond your intellect. And this is Mencius's point. that's actually who we truly are. That place, that fundamental good place. What happens is this our intellect begins to absorb all this knowledge, and then we begin to define who we are, so to speak. And then what happens then is that conflicts with that response. You know, like I think her name is Wang Ju in China, the young 2-year-old who got run over, and 18 people passed her by, weren't even concerned about her, and then another car ran her over. And then it wasn't until a shocked grandma came and picked her up. And then the study of this case, because this is on video, I mean, and you and I have both watched, and it's pretty horrifying that people could just be so cold to a child that's been run over. They're lying on the road. You know what I mean? So, and the study was that it came down to cold indifference. They didn't have a feeling of connection to the child. And what cognitive science is saying, they are looking at it from the dementia perspective, is that the nature of... They use China as the example, right? But the nature of specifically those 18 people who just passed her by and the people who drove over the baby are completely disconnected from their own nature, and they're wound up in this warped perspective of the world that they live in, which, as we talk about all the time, it's driven by competitiveness and like, you know, from their perspective, how does caring for this baby like relate to my life? I've got to get this job done. I don't care. Like, that's their perspective, right? Like, I've got to get to work. There's a baby dying on the ground. They can see it.
It's very sad that then we are trained to support the rules of society, and we trying to fit in the place in the society. But at the first place, the very idea, the fundamental idea of that was to help one another in order to build a healthy society and community.
Yes.
But in the end, the society became bigger and bigger, and there's too many rules and regulations that dictate us, and we build our own kind of prison. So in the end, like you said, we become very self-interested individual. Like we worry about, I gotta get to my job. Someone's gonna take care of her, or not even thinking about it at all. Like,
Yes.
They have lost the ability and natural instinct to feel the empathy.
Exactly.
And that'll just destroy the community in the end.
Yeah. Because it's destroying the individual.
Yes.
And then, so there can only be social breakdown.
That's right.
And it's always happened. That's always been the result of a system that speaks for you. A system that speaks for you. So that's why, like, in China now, they have this social credit system, right? So if you jaywalk or you, like, you do things that are just natural, right? Like, there's no cars on the road. You just cross the road. Come on, let's get real here. Like, what's with the over-regulation? Like, and so what happens then is people start to think the way that the system thinks, and then you're disconnected from people. And then, like what you said, that drives self-preservation, individual self-interest. Because I've got to just take care of myself. I've got to navigate through this system just to survive. And if there's a dying baby on the road, that's out of my periphery. Like, I can't even consider that.
Yeah, like, that's not my job.
It's not my job, yeah. Because my job is just to survive in this system. And that's where all the psychological troubles begin. And that's why we do see people behaving, like my example, behaving like that. Their nature is completely warped. And we're not having enough of this conversation in the world. We just blame people for behaving strangely, and we don't point the gun at the actual overarching system and say, hold on, what's wrong with that? Look, we may point the gun at China, so to speak, because of the way that they behave in the world of politics and the way that they, censor their world and don't allow individual liberation in this modern times, which again came from the cultural revolution, which is why Taoism was suppressed back in that time, why Tibet was destroyed, and the Dalai Lama had to leave. So, all of these things. And so we need to point the gun more at the system and saying, let's stop blaming the individual for a moment. They became the result of a society. What's wrong with the society? That's the conversation we should be having. And the reason why we don't have that conversation is because the leaders are trying to push you away from that, and the media are driving the attention towards the individual. And look, there should be some attention towards the individual who misbehave. Like I said, we need to take ownership as individuals. That actually contributes to spiritual growth, as you know. We're living in a world now where a lot of people don't take ownership for the things that they do wrong. So we all take ownership when we do something right? Yeah, man, of course I did that.
Me, I did it.
I did it, yeah. But when you ran over a cat, or you smashed a plate at home and you start blaming the kids or something like this, this is the end result, right? So we need to take ownership of those on an individual level, but more importantly, we need to expose the overarching systems. And this is why, with all of my work, is that we have to try and get back into resonance with these great traditions, because they're explaining that fundamentally we are pure. And yes, there are individuals behaving badly and this and that, but we need to understand why their nature is warped. We need to return to the uncarved block, and we need to realize that all of this self-cultivation is not serving us, actually. It serves us to a certain degree. Like you said, we have a society now where most people are generally, they're together, somewhat, but we're all still living up to expectations and status of how we should be. We live in the cult of comparison, where social media drives our attention of who we should be and what we aspire to be. We live in this world of vanity metrics, and this is killing us on a very subtle level. This is really driving psychotic behavior and tendencies within the individual.
Yeah, when individual crises happen, then we start to think about what is really wrong with us, within us.
Yeah.
And that's a place where you can ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And that's a very good start.
Yeah.
In the world today, so many people are suffering from mental problems. And it's a time to understand that it's kind of a journey of life. We were born pure, and every single person on earth had been conditioned and trained to be a certain way and to think a certain way, and that had suppressed a lot of things within ourselves. And as we have more life experience, as we get older, we start to question ourselves, because it doesn't seem like the way the life is right.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like. How many times we think of this? When we were a teenager, right? We wanted to become adult, right? Because the adults seem to be free, like they can do whatever they want, right? And once we become adult, then we're like, this is not the life what I imagined.
I want to be a teenager again.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be a kid again.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. But I'm pretty optimistic still that we can still build our own life in our own way. And we just got to make a right decision, right choice. We need to undo a lot of things within ourselves. If we feel unhappy, we need to question ourselves, well, why am I not happy? But then we can write a list of things that we dislike, right? That's a good start. We see things, what we don't like, and what we think is something wrong with the world, and this and that. And we start questioning ourselves. And we need to begin think for ourselves in the end.
So what you're saying is pointing to we need to build a world of trust, right? So fundamentally, we don't trust each other. Why do you think a system is built in the first place? It's a lack of trust in individuals. This is where Confucius and Lao Tzu are in strong disagreement. Lao Tzu is saying, actually, to have a strong system and to have a pure government, we need to trust the individual. We need to trust each other. And that leads to an organic process of how the world grows. And then we have what we have. We don't need a dictator or a system that's dictating to you to tell you what to do, because fundamentally, it doesn't trust you. It doesn't trust your nature. And this always irks a lot of people, especially when I mention this in my Taoist videos and my documentaries, because that's Lao Tzu's point of view, right? But it irks people because people think, oh yeah, but what about all of this and that, like all these problems and this and that? But it comes from someone who's got a warped nature, not someone who like is just following their life purely and trusting the world. It doesn't come from that person. It comes from someone who doesn't trust the world, who's indoctrinated by a system, and then their behaviors don't match up with their original nature. So they become this person, right? So our whole world is built on a lack of trust. And that's why, in some sense, we don't trust sometimes the system above us, because and in some sense you shouldn't, because they're telling you that you're a beast and you need to cultivate this and that. But the way to get out of that is to begin to trust other people and to begin to trust just the way of life, trust the Tao, and just to trust that flow in your own life and seeing where your life goes, opposed to trying to make your life accord to some other external system. And that can be difficult for people to do, because it requires a lot of letting go of certain things in your life, because we are all educated and trained a lot to go out and grab the world, and we should be someone and this and that. And Lao Tzu is saying, no, that's what actually breeds psychopathy. That breeds an insane individual, because you're not saying that I'm part of the world. You're saying I'm separate from the world. I'm disconnected from the world, and I need to somehow establish myself on top of this pyramid or this mountain above other people. He's saying, you got to chill, man. You got to just let go and understand that you belong to the world. And this actually frees your mind from a prison that you've built. It frees it from trying to go out there and establish itself as some sort of person and status. When you trust and you let go, what are you saying in that instant? You're saying that I'm completely fine who I am. I don't need a system or other people to validate my existence. I don't need the respect and appreciation from other people. I don't have a low self-esteem like that. As you know from studying psychology, you mentioned this to me a long time ago, that people who are go-getters and entrepreneurs and want to be successful people, what's driving a lot of them is a lack of self-esteem. Isn't it ironic, right? Because they want to establish themselves as somebody. They want to get respect from other people. And Lao Tzu is saying that's actually what breeds insane people. You need to understand that you belong, and you need to come back just into your nature and just let the world roll how it will roll. And your life will have rich experiences that will have resonances inside yourself on a very deep level. They will resonate within you on a deep level. And this is how we breed sane people. And Taoism is a system for breeding healthy and sane people, fundamentally. That's what, a lot of scholars are actually talking about these days, and what a lot of people don't consider, because they think that Confucianism, for example, was about breeding sane and healthy people. But the result of Confucianism is breeding unhealthy and insane people. There can be no other result. Same with other systems, like, for example, Christianity tends to breed a lot of people who don't think they belong. They don't feel as though they can trust the world, because they're instantly told that they are separate from God and that they're sinners, they're beasts, only Jesus was pure, So, and this is, from the get-go, is an insane system.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to let go and trust the universe to, not to sound like a cliche, but that's what we actually need to do. And look at the way you and I met, right? All those many moons ago, like, it wasn't true. It was just the way nature happened. Like, you bump into people, you have rich experiences, and then life has its way when you allow it to. When you're calculating life and you're trying to make it a certain way, you can't have rich experiences in life. This is why when we see people who are locked into a society who are very mundane and they're just chasing the dollar and they're just chasing status, they don't have rich experiences in their life. Whereas if you just let life if you leave enough space in life for life to do what it does best, and you let go of trying to control your life, you start to then, instantly you psychologically feel better because you're not trying to dictate to a game. You actually understood that this game of black and white that we're constantly playing doesn't really exist.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems psychologically within a lot of people is that we try to do a lot of things to please other people. Can be parents, teachers, or just colleagues. Just please other people and impress people too.
Yeah.
And Christianity is kind of the same thing. You're a sinful existence. You need to please God.
Yes.
That builds a lot of psychological problem, as we know. A lot of suppression, and that drives you to become a psychosis, pretty much.
It does drive you.
And that becomes so ingrained in ourselves, and we act out of that sort of mindset for a very long time. But that again, that sort of thinking is based on not trusting ourselves, not trusting the way life is, like you said. And we don't belong. We don't belong to this world. Therefore, to be able to feel secure and belong to the world, you need to please other people. But that's so untrue. We know that. And a lot of people suffer from that mindset. And we need to, instead of trying to please other people, we need to start please ourselves.
Yes.
Meaning, not like a pleasurable experience, not anything like that. It's more so to be able to trust ourselves. We'll be able to be very honest with ourselves and to see what we are, who we are. And the answer to those questions is not going to come overnight. We'll need to do a lot of work.
Yes.
We need to get our hands dirty.
Yeah.
Like, we need to face ourselves. What do I fear, for example? Again, being fearful of something is completely natural. It's not something that I'm a weak person, what an idiot. We don't have to beat ourselves about it. Having fear is a very natural thing, and overcoming it is a great process to become a mature person and overcome a lot of psychological problems. So, we need to look within ourselves, address a lot of things, and it's kind of a lifelong process. But as we know, there's so much peace and reward in that process. It gives us a lot of sense of security, meaning just being okay with what we are, who we are, and trusting the way where you are.
Yes.
Basically, and you belong. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I sometimes telling myself a lot that too. Like if I feel like really stuffed and frustrated about something, you know what? It's okay. Like nothing can be really perfect, and there is no such thing as perfection.
No.
We strive to be perfect. But sometimes a thing's not going to happen, and it's okay. That itself is perfect, maybe,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It gives us great sense of relief, actually, when we start think like that.
Well, again, the habit of judging ourselves that way, with that inner critic always in the background judging ourselves, is based on the social system. So most of our fears and that are unfounded. They're founded on just that if I do something, I'm stepping out of accord with what is socially accepted. That's all it is, right? That's where the fear arises, because I've played this game of following this game for so long, but now I'm thinking about, I want to play a new game. Instantly, when we try new things, a little bit of fear does arise. Fear is part of the human condition, and it's something we shouldn't condemn. Fear is, like I said in the Science and Practice of Humility, is in a sense one of our greatest friends. Because it humbles us and it allows us to move efficaciously through the world. You don't overstep your boundaries, so to speak, in some sense. But a lot of that fear arises because that's just the fear of the unknown. That, okay, you're a Korean person, right? I'm going to go to India and I'm going to move to Calcutta and all of these things that you did when you were a young person. But the fear arising because, what if I'm resonating with this culture and I love the teachings of this land and so forth and so on, but they don't, relate to where I'm from. Am I okay to indulge in this, or is it not okay? And that's just that's the old system playing over in your head, going, no, don't do this. We've already got a firm software in here. We don't need a whole reboot, But sometimes our lives, we need a complete reboot, and we need to transform our lives. And so I would say to anyone that, and even you and I, that when that fear arises, you have to investigate what that fear is. Where is that fear coming from? Is that the fear that's driven by the system that I've been brought up in? Is that the fear that my parents indoctrinated in me, or my friends expect of me?
Or what other people would look at you?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, and to unravel all that, we need to get into that state of trust and acceptance and understanding that we are pure. We need to all have, you and I and all people watching, some sort of spiritual responsibility to ourselves. Not to anyone else, to ourselves. So, for example, if we look at Mencius again, and Mencius has got the analogy of Ox Mountain, right? So Ox Mountain, where the story where Mencius is talking to one of his disciples, and Mencius is saying, look, everyone's nature is fundamentally good, and they live in a little city, right? A little town. And then the disciple goes, but look at Ox Mountain. It's in the middle of the town. It's barren, it's bare. It has no vegetation. It's obviously impure. And Mencius is like, no, you're seeing it the wrong way, see? It's fundamentally pure. What's happened is it's the environment it's in. So all the pollution from the city around, and them taking all of the resources, cut all the trees down, and then when the new sprouts begin, the goat farmers and the cow farmers, they eat all the things, so it looks barren. But its fundamental nature is pure, and that's all of us. But why I mention that story is because that also implies what Mencius is getting at a little bit, is that to have spiritual responsibility, you need to also think about the social system you're in, the environment you're in. What are they doing to you as well? Should you consider moving? Should you consider certain things? We don't know everyone's individual situation. A lot of people have different circumstances and can tolerate more than others. But for example, if you're in an abusive relationship, what's the point spiritually of
trying to keep
that going? So we all have that sort of spiritual responsibility. Whereas if we do say we create our life a certain way, and we create an environment that's suitable for us, or we move to a place that we resonate with, maybe another country or something like this, this may contribute to further spiritual growth for yourself. And often cases that if you move out of your familiar surroundings, that leads to a lot of spiritual growth. You and I know this really well because, we've lived in a lot of cultures for a long time outside of our original homes, and that contributes to a lot of spiritual growth. There's nothing you can say about it. A lot of people say, yeah, but you need to be good wherever you are. That's true too. I'm not going to discount that. But you can't discount the other way around as well. You can't discount that moving to a culture or a society that's completely foreign to you is going to transform on a deep level. You can't discount that because it does,
We need to discover ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
If we live in one place for too long, we get too used to that kind of lifestyle, and that lifestyle only bring you a certain side of yourselves, and environment doesn't challenge you anymore, right? At the beginning, you had to adapt, but after a while, once you get used to it, things are quite automatic. You don't have to even think about it. You already know how things are. But so there's the kind of background system in your mind is set. So it's not challenging anymore. Whereas if you were to go to somewhere completely different, like this world going upside down kind of thing, then it's completely different. You need to find a way to navigate through that different lifestyle. Then it'll challenge you in many ways, and in the end you'll have to act differently in order to find your way, right? And actually it's quite incredible what you can do actually in when you get to be in a completely different environment. You'll find yourself that, I didn't know I was this kind of person, right? Because the environment challenges you to act differently, because if you were to act the same way as you were in an old environment, but you're not going to get anything, probably.
This is why a lot of travelers find themselves when they travel. They discover their true nature. Because when they go to a place, like you went from Korea to India, right? When you go to a place like that, which is completely upside down, flipped around, tossed around like a pizza, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So when you go somewhere like that, what happens to your original system? It doesn't work. It's actually meaningless. And then what happens is when that begins to quieten inside of you, you begin to become just more present in the circumstances that you face. You know what I mean? So that's why we have a lot of rich experiences when we travel, because we see people when we travel more purely, because we begin to not see from that cultural background. And when I say travel here, I'm talking about long-term travel. I'm not talking about going on a holiday, as with you, years and years and years. So that Korean system doesn't serve you anymore, because being, a Confucian in India is just...
It's not going to work.
It's pointless. It doesn't work. India is a complete jungle. It's wild. So you have to get to stepping. So you don't have that noise in the background of I should behave like this, or I should do this and that. It's all gone because it's so quiet. Because what you're doing is you're living purely in the moment, and you're not letting a system dictate to you. And you're seeing people for who they are. You're seeing the circumstances for what they are, and you're just doing what is needed in that situation. And this is why people become addicted actually to traveling, because they get addicted to that feeling, because it quietens that cultural conditioning down a lot, and you're living from a much more pure place. Often we're not living in a very present moment in our own cultures that we were brought up in, because we're always thinking about how we should behave to in accord with that system, or how should I behave with my siblings or my parents, and you know what I mean, trying to keep up with the Joneses and all of this stuff that we get caught in a bad habit of, instead of just thinking of what's happening in this moment, how am I in this moment, what am I experiencing. We don't feel a lot of that when we're in our familiar environments. But when we're in a different environment, then we feel a lot of that. So, but that's part of, I'm not saying that we have to obviously move, but it can help to get out of your familiar surroundings to, and I don't understand why people actually wouldn't. I have people write to me all the time because I have, as you know, I have some videos on the spirituality of travel and stuff like that and how important it is to travel like a yogi. A yogi would never stay right in the same... The yogi's a perfect example, right? They never would stay in a place for longer than a few days, because the reason in yogic law is because you begin to develop the habits and tendencies of that particular community or society or whatever you want to call it, the larger group. And so a yogi being focused on individual liberation, acquiring cultural traits and that, this is secondary. Actually, not even something they want, because they want to just, unite with the divine. They want to complete yoga. So what does having all of these cultural traits and developing all of these tendencies from a certain community, how is that going to benefit my spiritual evolution? So we don't have to become a yogi. We can still live in familiar surroundings, but we need to have that sort of spiritual responsibility. Like I said, you have to be dedicated, not just to what we were talking about, you have to be dedicated to meditation, to truly understanding that you belong and that you're pure, and getting out of the habit of but the habit out of blaming yourself for certain things, for thinking that you are, inadequate or that you are lesser than other people. Getting out of this bad habit, truly understand that I belong and I am pure in my purest nature. But don't conflate that. A lot of people conflate this, especially in New Age. They conflate that with, my personality is pure in nature and this and that. It's like, no, your personality is still what we're talking about. It's built on the social structure, how you're indoctrinated, this and that. The pure nature within inside of you is beneath that, and you can abide in that and can live from that place. Obviously, you'll still have these, tendencies as a person, but what happens is when you begin to abide in that place is it begins to transform the actual persona system. And that's the importance of spiritual work, right? That's the importance of meditation, of these sorts of methods that in some sense are not designed to self-cultivate, but are designed to get back into your original nature. It's like when someone said to Shunryu Suzuki, Zen Master Shunryu Suzuki, when he had moved from Japan to California, and he was in, I think it was San Francisco. And Westerners, not sort of, as they do, not accepting just whatever an Eastern master would say. They have to intellectually try to understand it, which is in some sense good as well. But he would be explaining that we have to return to we are pure. We have to return, obviously this is part of Zen, very strongly part of Zen. We have to return to just how we are naturally. But then he would do, hours and hours and hours of Zazen with these students, right? And he would talk about, we don't need cultivation methods and this and that. And then the one lady asked him, Master, you say we don't need any cultivation, but every day that we're here, we're sitting for hours, 8-10 hours a day. Why even do it? And then Shunryu said, we sit because this is what Buddhas do. You're naturally a Buddha, and this is just what Buddhas do. Just like a cleaner cleans, a chef cooks, a Buddha meditates. That's what they do, So it's a different orientation towards it. It's not... why he's saying that? He's saying we're not trying to self-cultivate here. We're not trying to cultivate anything. What we're trying to do is we're trying to come back back inside. How do we do that? How do we get there? Well, you can't do that from going out here and partying and learning more and this and that. Learning can help point the way, but if you're not practicing and you're not really, going deep, then you're not going to understand especially what you and I have been talking about this whole podcast. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we have to get back inside. That's the thing. Like, our true nature is not out here. It's not like in the Yoga Sutras, how they say our mind is projected out into the outside world. And like, we are sucked into this habit of this gravitational pull of our mind being projected out there, right? So promoting our self-image, who we think we are, which is based all on a system of belief that assumes that you don't belong and that you're a beast, So deep meditation practices are about getting back inside. It's not about cultivating it's got nothing to do with your personality. If you want to cultivate your personality, I don't know, read books on entrepreneurship or read books on, cultivating business habits and this and that. This is, I have a video on this as well, a few videos on this, but spirituality, and especially Eastern spirituality, is not about self-improvement. It's got nothing to do with self-improvement. If you want to be interested in self-improvement, I'd suggest, like what you said, reading books on business or reading books on, social communication and how to be effective in the society.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that as well. It's good to be effective in society and this and that. But if you don't know what we're talking about today, all of that's meaningless in the end, because on your deathbed, you're going to be thinking, what was it all about? What was it all about? Like, I did all this, I accumulated all this wealth, I had 1,000 kids, I was married and divorced and married again, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? What was it all about? Like, I seemed like I was playing a game, but I didn't understand who the subject was. I was involved in the game. It's like, those first-person shooter games, like where you see the gun. You're not understanding who's behind the gun, but you're understanding the landscape of the computer game, right? So you're understanding all of this out there, but you're not. You never turn around and go, hold on, who the hell is this? Yeah. So Eastern spirituality is not about self-improvement, and New Age people often mistaken this because they think that it's about self-improvement. Oh, I'm an enlightened being and this and that. It's like, no. First of all, if you're an enlightened being, there's no I to pronounce or proclaim you're an enlightened being. You just come into resonance with something much deeper, that pure state that we're talking about, where the I evaporates. So it's about not self-improvement, Eastern spirituality. It's about understanding the nature of your existence. And it's got nothing to do with how you are in society and who you will become in society. It's about who you were before you became this person. And actually who you always have been, but you're playing this game of hide and seek, as Alan Watts would say. You're playing this game of hide and seek, like you're hiding, you're seeking this true nature that you really are. And so deep meditative practices will help open that door for you. But you can't be whimsical about it. You have to really, you have to take it seriously and go into it. We all have, because our natures are warped, we all have this spiritual responsibility to ourselves.
A lot of people strive so hard to become an individual, to be useful to society. Therefore, we chase a lot of things, like degrees and good career and whatnot. But actually, as Zhuangzi said about this, becoming this is his analogy about this useless tree. There is this in the old village in China. There is this massive tree. It doesn't know how to be straight, right? It's all wiggly and the leaves growing everywhere. There's no order to this tree, right? And people walking past around the tree every day, village people, how ugly this tree is. It got no use of it at all. We can't make a chair with it. We can't make a table with it. It's not straight. What kind of tree is that? And then Zhuangzi thought completely different. So for me, it's not. It's completely useful. If it was straight and rigid, what you think of a tree is supposed to be, then this tree won't be here. It will not serve its purpose. It will not give us fresh air. It will not give us nice shade to rest under. But because it has its complete beauty of this tree, just as it is, it gives us a lot of joy. The same thing.
Yeah.
Like when we start to cultivate ourselves, the real self begins to shine from us within ourselves. That's when real beauty of each individual will reveal itself,
Yes.
and that itself will serve its purpose. That's the only truthful purpose, I think. And we people, what's the purpose of me? What's the existential crisis that we go through? But that's how really is. That's the real purpose. That being a complete useless tree. How good is that?
Yeah, I love that analogy in the Zhuangzi because there's just so many layers to it. Like you said, like if you were a straight tree, right? Cut straight down.
Yeah.
Because you can use that for we can use that timber for like houses and boats and whatever you want. But this all contorted branches and this, like, what is this? But then, like Zhuangzi says, you're not really seeing the tree, because you're only seeing the useless aspect of the tree. But let's have a look at the tree, right? The tree is massive, and it goes like this, and it provides shade for all the horses, and this and that. It's a fundamental thing but you're not seeing that. You're only seeing like how you can use it, because that's the mentality of the society. What can I get from you? What do you provide? And that analogy of the useless tree is an analogy. Another is with everything you said, but it's also an analogy for the sage. So what does the sage do with what we were talking about? Is that in just allowing your nature just to be, without trying to cultivate yourself and making yourself this straight, rigid tree, you provide shelter for humanity. Your wisdom and your understanding and your knowledge provides greater shelter for humanity. And that's one of the great things of the useless tree analogy. And that's what we all should be doing, right? We all should be aspiring to allow life to be and allowing ourselves to be, because then we provide spiritual oxygen to a world that's starving, that can hardly breathe.
100%.
100%. And that's the role that we all have. We all have that responsibility to do that. And if we're always cultivating ourselves, then the world will often use you and cut you down in your prime. That's another thing it's also a longevity thing, the useless tree thing, right? Like, because the tree was useless, everyone left it alone, and then the sage could grow wise and old.
Exactly.
But when the straight tree, you're too useful. They cut you down in your prime.
But how many times do we hear this story, like in New York or California, these big mega cities, and the lawyers and Wall Street stockbrokers, such successful career, working 24/7 and such successful at what they do. But in the end, they just worn out.
Yeah.
Like they tap out. They gotta stop it. Like they can't just keep going and going and going. And again, therefore, so many people just drop dead. How sad is it?
Yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah. So we don't want to get that tree chopped down, do we?
No. Well, that's a good analogy you mentioned, because the tree being cut down is usually death. You know what I mean? Or it's like complete breakdown because the world can use you in a specific way. And in some sense, you have to embrace being useless. You know what I mean? We're always focused on being useful for the world because we want to be someone and something. When, look at everything that's useless, right? Look at the space that connects you and I. It appears useless, but that's what's truly useful. You know what I mean? We think, this microphone is useful because it's recording our voice and so forth and so on, but we're not acknowledging the uselessness of life, like this space between you and I, which creates a conversation, which allows the microphone to exist, all of these things, you know, that we don't consider because we're so short-sighted in our orientation to be competitive and to, you know, apply ourselves to a system that doesn't serve us and has not served us.
And when people decide go the other way, right? Then people often worry a lot because they are a bit scared. They just kind of stop doing what they do, and they, for example, they stop going out with friends. But instead of doing that, they spend more time with themselves and spend time regularly on practicing meditation or reading great traditional classics and things like that. And that kind of, when that kind of decision happen, and people kind of worry and be a bit fearful about it. Like, what if I lose my social life, and what if people judge me in a certain way? But we don't have to really worry about it when we see that useless tree analogy. Just the effort that we put in to become who we truly are is actually a great work for everyone. We might not see the results overnight, but that's I think it's the beauty of it.
Yes.
And we don't have to fear about other people's perception from going the other way.
Well, let's look at the useful tree and the useless tree, right? I'll ask you a question. Do you remember that businessman, really famous businessman in Pohang in the 1800s?
Well, not really.
Exactly. Do you see? All of that striving and this and that. But do you remember Lao Tzu?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Gautama the Buddha, Shankara, Gaudapada? You know, the list goes on.
Yeah.
They are the useless tree.
Yes.
That businessman in Pohang in Korea in the 1800s that you don't remember, many of them are the useful tree. The tree that can be used by society and this and that. They don't create resonances in the world that live on past their own life. You see what I mean? So we all remember Shankara. We all remember Lao Tzu. We remember Zhuangzi. We remember Mencius. We remember Gautama the Buddha. We remember all of these great individuals. But we don't remember those individuals.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you should strive to be remembered. But what it does say is that if you become the useless tree and you begin to shelter society and you begin to become the wise person within society, then that has a vibration that exists beyond your physical existence. It extends beyond that.
Their presence lives on.
Lives on. And when people say that they want world peace or they want the world to, you know, be a peaceful place to live in harmony, that's actually how we do it. It begins with the individual. It's a long-term project. You can't just get your picket signs and go and protest in the streets against the government or against a certain ideology. You need to transform yourself on an individual level. And becoming the useless tree is the way to do it. You become that useless tree, you become wise, you come back into your pure nature, and you allow existence in that to be as it will. And then your life will live on beyond your own physical existence, you know. And as you were saying before, that may mean that you might lose interest in like social stuff.
Things.
And that's all right. It's perfectly fine. I would say you don't have to be anxious about that. You remember there was that satsang back in Tiruvannamalai with Muji back in 2010, and then one guy came up, really nice guy, came up and said, you know, Muj, I'm just abiding as the self, and I'm just letting life be. I've just been doing this for years, and I just don't have any any interest, and I don't have any social interests. And like he was thinking from a place that maybe this is not right. Like maybe I should have interests and this and that. And you know what Muji's response was? Very great. So you know what I mean? Like from his perspective, it's like, yes, this is good. This is good. Like because
You're on the right path.
you're on the right path. Because if you have an axe to grind, if you have something that you want to, extract from the world, that's the problem. That's the heart of the problem. Because you're still acting again from a place that's not truly yourself. But you see, he was in a place because he'd been just that guy. I think he was European. Had been maybe British. Had been living in Tiruvannamalai for a few years, and he's just abiding in the self. He's just shanti, shanti, shanti. But he thought that maybe I should I have interest in the world? Should I be concerned about this political turmoil? Should I have an input about this certain conflict between individuals? No, we don't need more of that because we have too many people interfering with the world. You need to be the useless tree. You need to be just letting life just be as it will. And then that is going to, as Richard Wilhelm said in the I Ching, that's going to create incomparable values for the future, for humanity. Not you going out and trying to become an entrepreneur and this and that, and trying to, put yourself on a pedestal above other people. We don't need more of that. There's too many people trying to do that. Just look at social media. We need people to rein it in and to become who they truly are. And again, a lot of people make excuses, like they say, oh, but that doesn't pay the bills and this and that. And it's like, how many excuses are you going to do before you actually play this game? You know what I mean? Like, we don't need no more excuses, Our spiritual responsibility is to stop the excuses. Oh, but, like the common argument, oh, but like if we follow the Taoist way, for example, to use Taoism as an analogy, nothing will get done. Like, if we trust other people and this and that, and it's like, what are you talking about? Are you still going to go to the bathroom? Are you still going to cook a meal? Are you still going to say hello on the street to someone? What are you talking about? That's the society inside people speaking for them. That's not their true nature. That's the society in them holding on to what's being created. No, you've got to let go. You've got to trust. You've got to be committed to this path fully, or don't even start playing the game. Continue to play the game of competition and comparison and see where that takes you. Because I guarantee you on your deathbed, you're going to look back at this moment where you made that decision with regret, because you left all of that behind you, and you could have been following the path of peace and contributing to a more harmonious world in that decision. But you didn't. You made excuses for yourself, or I should say better, you made excuses for your socially indoctrinated self because you wanted to see its survival. Your ego wanted to see its survival. It is the ego, right?
Yeah, the people, I think they're often mistaken in the idea of being a living Taoist way.
Yeah.
People think that like, I live like busy life and I got so much to do and this and that, and but now I'm going to take a spiritual path. And that's just going to be just completely different. It's going to be upside down. It's actually not like that. That's people taking it too literally, and it's kind of misunderstanding, I think.
Yep.
It's actually when you take a spiritual path, it actually enhances what you do. On the other hand,
exactly, it does. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that like non-doing is doing. Not literally. Like nothing is gonna get done. This kind of misunderstanding.
Yep.
It's nothing like that at all. It gives you a lot more ease and peace with what you do, and actually while you do, you will become much more present in what you're doing. People think that way, but it's not true at all.
No. And that's psychological ease, like you said, is really what's important, right?
Yeah.
Like that free and easy wandering of Zhuangzi, where the world is not weighing you down anymore.
Yeah.
You're not weighed down. You're like a feather. You're just floating through existence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're living very beautifully, very gracefully.
Yeah.
And this is not just in Taoism, as you've mentioned, but it's in all sorts of cultures. Like even when you look at Shaivism, right? Like you see a lot of Indians in South India, obviously they pay huge respect to the gurus and the sadhus and the yogis. But there's also, amongst householders, there's also that idea like, that's just for them, you know what I mean? It's like, no, it's not. It's not. It's like what you said. It's not that you have to live a certain way like that. You can be a householder and you can be engaged in permanent sadhana, right? Your sadhana can be your life, you know?
A good example for someone like Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Exactly, yeah.
He ran a small, like a shop until the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, he was this great teacher and sage who gave very important lessons to so many people.
Yeah, just smoking little biddies all day.
Yeah.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy? People going to his house and that.
Yeah, just an average person that you could meet on the street, but he had such great insight in life.
Yeah. Well, I am that. I mean, one of the classics, right?
Oh, yeah.
One of the classics. He was a spiritual giant, but he didn't have to be a sadhu. There's nothing wrong with being a sadhu too. The thing is that what we do, because of our indoctrination, is we create too many categories. And one thing about Eastern thought is it's beyond categories. So like, you can be a householder and you can be a guru at the same time. You can also be a sadhu and be a guru at the same time. You can be a doctor and be a guru at the same time. Man or woman, doesn't matter. Do you see? But we are often, and I think it comes a little bit from Western thinking too, because of Western orientation towards categories, of always categorizing things, that we should be doing something a certain way to be a certain way. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that at all. You need to, again, to get back to what we're saying, take on some sort of spiritual responsibility. And whatever happened in your physical existence and your social existence is just going to be as it will, you know? That would be like you and I waking up one day and saying, okay, we're breaking up, we're just going to do sadhu. We're just going to be sadhu. You know what I mean? Because that's the way it is. And it's like, no, that's not the way it is. That would actually be against the actual way, like against grace, if we were to use Shaivism as an example. The grace or the Tao in your life is not by just saying that's it and you just do something else. You know, obviously there has to be situations sometimes like that, but not in that sort of situation, you know. So
yeah, we don't have to just... That itself is a bit of a force too.
That's force, yeah.
Yeah, like,
you're not allowing life to do it.
That's right.
To be as it will.
Whereas if we completely try to let go of things in life and just you allow things just to happen and things just to come to you, then you will naturally be on the path while you don't even know it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the real path of spirituality. You are kind of effortlessly being in a path. And that's what we want.
Yes.
Yeah.
The great challenge for all of us is how to become natural again. That's the great challenge, right? So we all are pure. We are all of these mighty beings. Every single one of us are these mighty beings. But how do we become pure again? And that comes down to our individual responsibility to becoming natural again. And they will have different ways of getting there, right? But there has to be that commitment that I want to be natural again. I'm sick of playing this game, you know. The greatest threat to mankind, to humanity, is the dissolution of the ego and coming back into contact with who you are. That's the greatest threat to society, is the dissolution of the ego and coming back into your true nature. Society doesn't want that. It wants you to be an ego and to continue to promote this ego in a world where there's other egos competing and comparing with each other. But the greatest threat to this game, and when the game is finished, when the game over sign is up, is when you've stopped playing the game and you begin to dissolve that ego and come back into your nature through spiritual work, through the focus on that, the emphasis that you want to become natural again. You're sick of being unnatural. And only, then can you become the useless tree, and your life will begin to resonate beyond your existence now. So, and we all have that opportunity. Yeah. So we're all a Buddha, we're all a Lao Tzu, we're all a Shankara, we're all of these great spiritual giants, but we are continuing to play a game where we are not valuing ourselves because we believe that we are this ego that needs to be somebody instead of just understanding that we are already who we truly need to be and have always been that. And we're the same. We're all the same. We are that one consciousness that's expressing itself subjectively in this world. But the name of the game is to come back inside and understand that though I'm a beautiful wave, well, not me personally, but let's say you're, that deep down in my core, I am naturally pure, and I'm original, and I'm natural. And the only reason I don't believe that is because my nature's been warped, and I think I am this carved and polished piece of wood, when I was naturally the useless tree, the uncarved block. So I think we covered all that. So yes. Hope you guys all got a lot out of that. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. Guy-Young and I we're gonna be doing this every week, probably every Sunday, it looks like at the moment. And yeah, make sure you check out my Patreon page if you enjoy all the content. A lot more content coming out. Like, subscribe. Make sure you share this content with your friends. You know, a lot of people say to me they want the content to reach a wider audience. Well, how does that happen? I don't know with YouTube how that happens, but all I can say is that if you are liking and sharing with your friends, that's how it can reach a wider audience on the ground level. And who knows what will happen in the future. So I hope you guys all got a lot out of this. And remember that deep down in your true nature, you're pure. You don't have to believe that you're this person that's handicapped by society. This is all nonsense. So come back into resonance with that. Be committed to your own spiritual evolution. And Guy-Young and I will meet you on the mountaintop. So have a good day.